Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Akshay Iyer, and I'm part of the advisory team here at Sarwa. I'm really excited about today's session because we have the privilege of hosting our favorite personal finance author, Andrew Hallam. Andrew is the best-selling author of Millionaire Expat, Millionaire Teacher, and his latest book, Balance. And look, we've had the pleasure of collaborating with Andrew on several occasions. He consistently stands out as, one of the sort of top thought leaders when it comes to breaking down complex financial concepts into really easy to understand terms. And this is all backed by solid data. And I think what's even more impressive is all of his extensive experience. Andrew's been invested for over half of his life, so navigated, multiple of different market conditions. So Andrew, thank you for joining us today. I know you're in New Jersey right now, so thanks a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure, Akshay. Thanks. This is good. I'm excited about this topic. Actually, really excited about it.
Me too. And look, as I mentioned, right, Sarwa and Andrew have done a lot of webinars and events in the past. I think more recently, we've been focusing a lot on market volatility, a lot on investing. And we've, really proud to say, I think for the majority of our clients and a lot of clients in the region now, I think people understand that that is a part of investing. It's an absolute guarantee. Unfortunately, you can't control it. But, I think we're all firm believers of focusing on things that you can control. And one universal goal for all of us is retirement. Now, retirement can take, many forms, but financial independence is a key uniting goal for almost everyone I speak to. And I'm sure it's the same with you, Andrew, and I'm sure it's the same with a lot of other people. So today, we're going to be talking about retirement. So different ways to retire, how to draw down from your investments, exploring different retirement destinations, and actually what makes them great. And as I said, right, it's great that we've got Andrew with us today because like many of us, Andrew's also been an expat, is an expat. You were a teacher in Singapore, you've lived around the world. So a lot of the audience also, probably know that you've actually achieved financial independence in your late 30s. So, who better to have a discussion with this today? And then for everyone in the audience, just a heads up, we're going to be going through the presentation, but we really want the session to be interactive. So please feel free to ask any questions in the Zoom Q&A, and we're going to make sure to address them by the end of the presentation. Perfect. So right before we get started, just a couple of disclaimers over here. And the first one is we don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict the future. I can't. Andrew can't. Warren Buffett can't. And unfortunately, nobody can actually predict the future. So if anyone came to this webinar today to get stock tips, I'm sorry, we can't help you with that. And also, the discussion today should not be interpreted as one-on-one financial advice. But with that being said, it usually does account for a lot of people. So if you've got any particular questions about your own individual circumstances, please let us know in the Q&A, or please feel free to reach out to the team directly. Okay, so let's get started. So early retirement is a dream for many, but achieving it requires a lot of planning and being very disciplined. So Andrew, wanted to just kick this off with a few questions for you. So can you talk about the impact of starting to save early when it comes to planning for retirement, and just talk about some strategies for early retirement?
Yeah, well, generally, it's a pretty rough rule of thumb that for every 5 years you wait when it comes to actually saving your money for retirement, getting started with an investment program, for every 5 years you wait, you have to invest about 80% more money every month to end up with the same amount. So the important thing is, you don't have a time machine, you can't go back in time, but you're never going to be younger than you are right now. So if you haven't started investing for your future, start today. Don't worry about speculating, because speculating generally hurts people. Don't think about what level the markets are at or the economy or political elections. Just start as soon as you have your money and invest your money as soon as you have it. So if you have a lump sum now, invest it all. As money comes in from your salary, add to that. Don't worry about how the money fluctuates over time. Just continue to add money. As a result of that, you'll end up, if you can just close your eyes to all the noise, close your ears, you'll end up beating the vast majority of professional investors over your lifetime. So, as Akshay's noted too on the screen here, setting your clear goals, having a backwards design model actually for retirement is actually a pretty good idea. I did talk about a little bit how to do that in my book, Millionaire Expat. So how much do you actually need? And then set a backwards design model so that you can reach that goal Again, it's going to be flexible. You might reach it a little earlier than you expect. You might reach it a little bit later than you expect, or you might pivot entirely and change the expectation depending on where you're choosing to retire. So that's another thing that we're going to be bringing into this. Akshay is talking about here too, like automatic savings. Make it automatic. Don't invest what you have at the end of each month, whatever's left over. Treat it like a tax. Take it out of your account. Have it automatic as possible, so your money just is removed from the you don't have a temptation to actually spend it. Minimizing debt is a huge one. Pay off any high interest debts that you have before investing. So if you have debts that are charging you interest of 7% plus, just pay it off. Just pay it off. That's equivalent to an after-tax return of 7%. So if it's a mortgage, that's another thing. People sometimes, you'll note that typically mortgages are going to be on the lower end with respect to interest, but of course rates are rising. There's always that ongoing debate. Do I pay off my mortgage faster or do I invest my money? We can't actually see the future, but we do know that the idea of trying to do both is a really smart solution. Like if you can expedite your mortgage, great, if you've got a property. And then of course, at the same time, don't forget to automatically invest for yourself and maximize those contributions.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. And look, for a lot of people, this is great. And we're saying start investing early, but some people might just start investing later. Are there any strategies that you would recommend for people, to catch up on their retirement savings?
Actually, one thing people often talk about doing is they talk about taking higher risk to make up for lost ground. Don't do that. Don't do that. Determine what your risk profile is, your asset allocation, and stick to it, because markets can be volatile. And so you could end up with a period where you've taken high risk, sometimes silly amounts of risk. And when the markets drop, it can end up really freaking you out, especially if you're a new investor. So the important thing about asset allocation is that it doesn't matter so much how a portfolio or an asset allocation performs over time. It's how you perform with the allocation that counts. So for example, there are people that can say, all right, well, I'll go with 100% global stocks. I won't have any other component, because when we look at back tests over 30, 40-year periods, 100% global stocks beats 80% stocks, 20% bonds, or 60% stocks, 40% bonds. However, as I mentioned, it's not how the allocation performs, it's how you perform with the allocation. So if the stock market dropped considerably, say it's the year 2000, and it did drop a lot, 2001, 2002, bottomed out 2003, a lot of people who had 100% global equities bailed. They bailed on the strategy because their portfolio was cut in half, versus people that had a more defensive allocation. Let's say it was 70% stocks and 30% bonds. They got into profitable territory earlier on, and their portfolio didn't fall as far. So I'm not recommending a portfolio allocation for everybody at every given age. So I'm not saying here's the best portfolio allocation for a 40-year-old. It's so dependent on you. So whatever you think your risk tolerance is, back it up a bit, because generally we overestimate how much we can tolerate volatility.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Andrew. And I think also what a lot of people forget is that, look, when you hit that retirement age, and even if you start later, if you're 40 years old and you start saving for retirement at hopefully 60 years old, it doesn't mean that age 60, all of your money gets pulled out of your investment account. Your money still stays invested. It still has the opportunity to grow. And I think a lot of people don't actually realize that. And we're going to touch upon the 4% rule also a little bit later, which is a really good way to actually draw down from investments. But one thing I also wanted to kind of highlight is, we just talked about starting early. And it's one key thing, and it's not really a strategy. It's almost more of a caution. But as expats, a lot of people find it very tough to save and invest, and that's a lot due to lifestyle. Andrew, you've used the term expatitis in your books before. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's something that it starts really slowly, where, let's say you're living in your home country and you haven't moved abroad. The idea of is that, when you go abroad, often you'll think, I'm moving, let's say to Dubai for an opportunity. I'm not going to be paying income tax. Everything is going to be capital gains tax free if I'm investing in my investment portfolio. But what ends up happening in a place like that, where people, especially in Dubai, where salaries tend to be a little higher than average globally for sure, and there are no income tax rates, is people end up spending their money a little bit frivolously, and they don't notice it because a norm is established by the community. So if the entire community, everyone you work with, is spending a certain way, you might think, well, this is normal, like to do what they're doing, to go out for dinner like 4 times a week and to always go out for lunch every day. This might be a normal thing, or go off for holidays that tend to be kind of expensive. And yeah, you can afford it based on your actual income, but can you truly afford it with respect to that older self that's inside you, the custodian inside you? Like, are you looking after yourself in your later years? And what ends up happening, actually, is a lot of people, they'll establish a norm based on the community they're living in and think, well, I'm just living like everybody else, so I'm not a spendthrift. But the reality is, the vast majority of expats spend way more than they should. And they really need to be spending a lot more on, or putting away a lot more money for their future. So that's why I call this expatitis. It's kind of like a disease. It feels really pleasant in the early stages because you're living pretty well. Everybody around you basically has it, but later on, that disease becomes pretty painful, like a lot of the other itises.
Yeah, it's just that keeping up with the Joneses, right? It's a lot of people just trying to live a lifestyle that they're not really able to keep up with. But it's good to highlight that because in Dubai, as you mentioned, it is something that is quite common. So everyone should keep mind of that. Look, the last one, just for a question for this is, we've talked a little bit about these sort of strategies, but can you share any personal anecdotes? You're the one who was able to achieve financial independence at an early age. How did you implement some of these strategies?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because some people will think immediately, oh, Andrew must have deferred gratification. That's one thing people think. If you're going to be frugal, you're deferring gratification or you're deferring happiness for some point in the future. And so for me, like I never had a really high salary. So I was a school teacher. I had met a mechanic who ended up becoming a millionaire, a self-made millionaire, just by investing early, intelligently, and frequently, and not spending loads of money on material acquisitions. And so I use that as a model. And actually, it's funny because I had a super happy existence in my late teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. I mean, I've been generally really, really thrilled with how every aspect of my life has worked out. You might look back and go, well, wow, Andrew was really frugal. One thing I did was I documented every penny that I spent and every penny that I earned. And I recommend, if you're not doing that now, if you get one thing out of this whole seminar, get that one thing. Document every penny you spend, categorize it, and every penny that you earn. So it's so easy to do. Back in the day, I just had a notebook that I did it with. You can have an app like you could use Pocket Expense or Mint or Good Budget. And just when you go to the grocery store, for example, just enter like groceries, put in what the actual cost was. For everything you spend, what will happen is your spending is going to start aligning with your values. You're going to start feeling really accountable for what you're spending because you're going to actually see it categorized. And it's not so much that some people say, well, I've got a Visa or my credit card does that. It's not the same thing. It's that tactile element of knowing that you have to add it as soon as you spend it. And in doing that, that habit creates a level of accountability. And now back to the deferred gratification and then the happy living aspect of it all. Research suggests that, and I gave reams of research on this in my book, Balance, material acquisitions do not enhance your overall life satisfaction at all. So the things that I was deferring, the things I wasn't buying, weren't subtracting from my overall wellness or life satisfaction. So for example, a new car, hedonic adaptability comes into play where you're excited at first to have that car. It's like a sugar fix. But after a while, it's just this thing that gets you from A to B because you get used to it. Then your neighbor a few years later buys a better car, and the norm rises, and now you think, I need the better car. I'll feel happier with the better car. But it's an illusion. So this whole idea of deferred gratification, and financial advisors talk about that all the time. You have to defer gratification. I say to heck with that. That in itself is kind of crazy. Don't defer gratification, because you could be dead in 3 years, no matter how young you are. But use science to figure out what does enhance life satisfaction. And material acquisitions do not. So yeah, that's the long and the short of the story there, Akshay.
Perfect, Andrew. Thanks a lot for that. And I think it speaks a realm of truth, for a lot of people, because it's the combination of them, right? We talked about it before, that keeping up with the Joneses mentality, and thinking that these things might bring you satisfaction. It just might not be the case. So thank you for that. So look, moving on to saving and investing tips, right? So this slide covers some very essential principles that significantly can impact your financial success. So just go through them very briefly, right? So the first is diversification. It's key. So by spreading your investments across various asset classes, sectors, you can reduce your risk and improve the stability of your portfolio. And this way, if one investment performs poorly, others can actually help, cushion that impact. The next thing is asset allocation. This involves balancing your investments among different asset classes, such as stocks and bonds, and the right mix can vary, right? Depending on your risk tolerance, your time horizon, and your financial goals. Risk management, this is another crucial aspect, understanding the risks that are associated with different investments and having strategies in place to mitigate them, right? This can protect your portfolio from significant losses. The fourth thing is, and this is extremely important, right? Choosing low-cost investments. This is vital. High fees can really eat into the returns over time. So opting for investments with low fees, index funds, ETFs, this can help you keep a lot of your money and keep it working for you. And very importantly, life changes, things happen on an ongoing basis. Make sure that you review and adjust your portfolio over time. As you get closer to retirement, you may want to change the asset allocation towards maybe more bond market ETFs, these sorts of things. So, overall, these are, I would say very basic and sort of holistic saving and investing tips. But to, dive a little bit deeper, Andrew, I wanted to ask you, so how should somebody approach, somebody who's approaching retirement, let's say, think about their asset allocation? What sort of factors should they consider when trying to balance their investments?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The idea of, first of all, the asset allocation that you mentioned, while you are adding money to your portfolio, and even after, when you're retired and you're withdrawing a sustainable amount, should stay relatively stable. Like, you shouldn't be adjusting it based on what you see as market conditions, but adjusting it based on your tolerance for volatility, your tolerance for risk that you establish and pre-establish. So it's not like your tolerance for volatility changes based on market conditions or what the market has actually done to your portfolio. You set that allocation and you try to keep generally a similar allocation throughout while you're adding money, and then of course through retirement. Now, what Akshay is actually talking about with respect to retirement is that sometimes we get especially nervous at the thought of withdrawing money. And there are people that get used to, okay, I understand market volatility. I understand that, if I'm adding money every single month and I'm dollar cost averaging, I'm actually getting more market units at a lower price when the markets drop, and I'm getting fewer market units when the markets rise. So in essence, you're paying overall a below average price for your investments. And then that same person who might be able to handle volatility while they're adding money to the markets might end up start feeling pretty nervous when it comes to actually withdrawing money from their portfolio. And so this is what Akshay is talking about when he's saying, like, at that stage, you're really reassessing this and saying, okay, what can I actually tolerate? Can I still tolerate a 100% global stock market allocation? And that can be pretty nerve-wracking, because you can get a 2008, 2009 where your portfolio would literally fall during that time period 40% during an 8-10 month period, which can be pretty frightening stuff. And so that can end up encouraging people to speculate in all kinds of crazy ways, like pulling money out of the market. And I've saw so many retirees doing that, people that figured they had a high risk allocation and saying, I can handle it. I can handle it. And then 2008, 2009 came, markets dropped, and those same people were absolutely wetting the bed and knowing that they have to sell their investments or pieces of it. It freaked them out. And what was worse than that, many of them ended up selling the whole thing and getting back into the market like a year and a half later when they felt more comfortable with it, but the market had risen substantially. So setting that allocation and being really consistent with it is important. Akshay's talking too about like, what is the length of your retirement, which is an important component to remember. I think regardless of how old you are, you should set sort of an idea that you're going to live at least 30 years. So that should be a given regardless of when you actually retire. If you are retiring early, let's say you're retiring at 50, and you could be living another 40 to 50 years, then you're really going to need, for the portfolio to last, you're going to need for it to have a fairly strong stock market allocation. So you're not going to be in a good place if you have something like 60% allocated to bonds and 40% allocated to the stock market. Because if you're trying to withdraw, let's say an inflation adjusted 4% per year, and your retirement is 40 to 50 years with no other income coming in other than your retirement portfolio, then the odds are pretty high that you could end up running out of money. So considering all of that, a sweet spot for many people, not for everybody, but for many people, ends up being about 60% stocks and 40% bonds. If you have a stronger stomach, you might stick with 80% global stocks and 20% global bonds, but it really does depend on how you can handle short-term volatility. Because remember what I said before, it's not so much how the portfolio performs or the allocation performs, it's how you perform with the allocation. Can you systematically stick to the plan?
Great, Andrew. Thank you for that. And it goes back to what you said, right? If people have, whatever you think that your risk appetite might be, maybe take it one step back. Investing is all about having a steady hand, and in times of volatility is really when you're tested. So, regularly review your investments, because that's always going to be key. Look, another one that we've got on the board, we've got diversification. So, Andrew, can you explain why diversification is so important for investors, but more specifically important for investors who want to retire early?
Yeah, diversification, just think of it as like eggs in baskets. And so if you put all of your eggs in a single basket and that basket tips over, you break a lot of eggs. It's a lot safer for you to put your money in a variety of different baskets. And so when I say that, I'm looking at global stock and global bond allocation. So it's fully diversified so that your portfolio has exposure to the US market, the emerging markets, the developed international markets like Europe, Canada, Australia. There's typically always a party going on somewhere. And your portfolio has a piece of that party, that's wonderful. One of the risks that people get into is they say, well, look, recently the US stock market has absolutely ripped it up. I'm not bothering with global diversification. I'm just going to go with US stocks. And when they look at the short-term results, that's true. Even when they look at the long-term results, including the last 10 years, that's true. When I say long-term, I'm really talking about like 90 years. So short-term is, to me, 10 years is still short-term. But if you look at the performance of the US stock market over the past 10 years, it's rocked. It's beaten just about, not all, but it's beaten the vast majority of global markets. And that has given it an above average boost when looking at the long term as well. But keep this in mind. If you're tempted to say, you know what, forget it, I don't want any part of Europe or Canada or Australia or the emerging markets in my portfolio, I'm going US all the way because the US is the best. keep in mind that there are periods of huge levels of underperformance for specific markets. Many people talk about Japan. They say, well, if you put all your money in Japan in 1997, it would have taken you decades before you broke even. True, which is one major reason why we want to be fully diversified. But let's take the United States. Let's take the golden goose. And what a lot of people don't know is that from 1965 to 1982, the US stock market didn't make money. Okay, I'm going to say that again. 17 years. The US stock market did not make money. In fact, the Dow Jones Industrials was at the exact same level in 1982 as it was in 1965. When we add in reinvested dividends, the Dow Jones Industrials and the S&P 500 did not beat inflation. However, if someone had a globally diversified portfolio over that time frame, including other global markets plus a bond element that they rebalanced annually, maintained a consistent allocation, they absolutely beat inflation. So my point here is that you can't predict what market is going to do well in the future. Another case in point was from the year 2000 to 2011. US stocks, including dividends, that's 11 years, made no money. If, on the other hand, you had a globally diversified portfolio with stocks and bonds, yes, you would have earned a profit over those 11 years. And again, it's really how well can you handle a specific allocation too. So not only is it safer to be globally diversified, because you never know what darling market is going to turn into like a dog, but it's so important that with diversification, we do decrease volatility. And by decreasing volatility, we increase the odds that we are going to behave appropriately with our investments and not freak out.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think that last part you said is so key, right? It makes sure not only does it reduce the overall volatility, but with that will allow you to have that steady hand a lot easier. So look, we've talked about diversification. Diversification is a key part about risk management. It's a very successful component, for any investor. So, and I guess, going back from what we were talking about before for yourself, how did you manage your own risk when it came to your own portfolio, and any tips that you could offer for people in the audience?
I think it's really quite individual. So my portfolio is generally, it's about 60-40. It might be, I might have about 38% in bonds and the rest in global stocks. So it's pretty standard as an allocation. This is just something that I'm comfortable with. I'm happy with doing this. I've had this allocation for quite a while now, and it's one that I'm going to maintain. So I did mention in my book, Millionaire Expat, that if you saw me and I was 85, I'm 85 years old and I'm water skiing, and you yell out, "Hey, Andrew, like, what's your allocation?" I could be 85 years old. And I'll yell back like 60%, 40%. Like, for me, that's just an allocation that works nicely for me.
Perfect. Glad to hear that. Okay, so moving on to a little bit more of a practical way when we're talking about drawing down from investments. So a lot of people think, and we talked about this before, right? When you retire, that's the day that you sell off your investments. But that's not the case, right? You want your money to continue to grow for you so that you can live off those proceeds. I think the stage of life that many people on this webinar are in right now, it's the accumulation phase, right? It's you working, you're earning, you're putting money towards your investments, and we're all working towards that second stage, the distribution phase, retirement, when you start drawing down from your investments, or financial independence, whichever form it comes in. So for retirement, a lot of people advocate for the 4% rule. Now, it's not a rule, and doesn't need to be hard and fast. It's a very popular guideline. And it just determines how much you can withdraw from your retirement savings each year without running out of money for a 30-year period. So very simply, right, the 4% rule, it's a widely accepted rule of thumb in retirement planning. It suggests that you can withdraw 4% off your retirement portfolio in the first year of retirement, and then adjust that amount for inflation each subsequent year. In terms of how it actually works, so the rule is based on historical data, as well as assumes a well-diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds. We're not looking at just one individual stock, or to say the 4% rule will work on cryptocurrency or something like that. This is evidence backed, and it's based on a well-diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds. So by sticking to this guideline, the idea is that your savings should last for at least 30 years. Andrew mentioned the time frame 30 years. So, and that should, hopefully cover the majority of your retirement years. And the last part, and I'd say this is very crucial, it's adjustments, right? The 4% rule, it provides a really good starting point, but it's really important to be flexible. Everyone has their own individual circumstances. Where you live, maybe 4% is not quite enough. Maybe where you live, 4% is plenty. So market conditions, personal spending needs, unexpected expenses, all of these can impact your withdrawal rate. But being adaptable, making sure that you review your plan on a regular basis, that will actually help you ensure that money lasts as long as you need it to. So, this is the 4% rule, right? Andrew, you've written about it. A lot of people know about it. So what are the main assumptions, behind this rule?
Well, as you mentioned, it was back tested to 1926. The idea is that you keep costs low, it's diversified, and that you don't speculate with your portfolio. And that you have to have a reasonable allocation to stocks. So it can't be, 60% bonds and 40% stocks, because generally the odds then are that you could run out of money. It's funny, actually, in 2010 is when I first started. It was around 2010, 2011. I first started reading articles by people saying, well, the 4% rule won't work anymore. Whenever anybody says that, they're implying that they can see the future. They can see what future bond interest rates are going to be, what future stock rates are going to be. This was back tested to 1926, where you looked at, even somebody investing or having retirement in 1929 and experiencing a massive stock market drop in 1929, which bottomed out in 1932. Even then, somebody withdrawing, making inflation adjusted withdrawals would have seen that money last at least 30 years. Do we know that the future will be exactly the same as the past? No, we don't know that, but we do know that all predictions in that vein are wrong, typically wrong. We can't see the future, though there are always reams of people pretending that they can. It's funny because it was around 2010 where I first started seeing articles saying 4% rule doesn't work anymore. Well, I'll tell you this, if you retired in 2010, that's 14 years ago. If you had $1 million and you started withdrawing inflation adjusted 4%, you would have like significantly more money today than you would when you first retired, even when adjusting for inflation. So yeah, it's quite interesting. We look at one of the worst time periods to retire would have been the year 2000. So we know that U.S. stocks went nowhere, including reinvested dividends, from 2000 to about 2011. And so somebody retiring in 2000 might really freak out sticking to a 4% rule, because they withdraw, let's say, $40,000 from a $1 million portfolio in year one. In year two, their portfolio ends up dropping 15%, drops another 15%, another 10%. Sort of, you get these three big drops in a row. The idea for that retiree to continue to withdraw more than $40,000 in that case each year, despite the fact that the market had been dropping 3 years in a row, is quite frightening and can really freak people out. And so I think too, in this vein, it's important for you to do two things. Okay, there's one, you look at the probability of the actual portfolio. Incidentally, if you're curious, anyone who retired in the year 2000, who withdrew an inflation adjusted 4% per year, we've done 24 years now since then, that portfolio would be worth more now than it would have been worth in the year 2000. So the biggest risk is not the stock market itself. The biggest risk is your behavior, how you might freak out. And to be conservative, actually put it really well, because he called this the 4% rule of thumb. And so the idea is, let's say you get a year 2000 where your portfolio drops 3 years in a row. Well, in the second year, you might decide, okay, well, let's say last year I withdrew $40,000. I'm going to withdraw a little bit less this year. I'm just going to use a bit of what would be common sense emotionally instead of withdrawing $40,000 indexed to inflation, so maybe a 42,000 or whatever it might be, you decide, no, I'm going to withdraw 37. I'm just going to suck in my belly a little bit, tolerate slightly less in terms of my income, and ride this out a little bit. That can help you mentally. And at the same time, the biggest risk of the 4% rule is actually dying with too much money. And whenever anybody writes about it, they always look at worst case scenario. Oh, it doesn't work anymore because look, there's a 15% probability that you might run out of money within a 30-year period, or whatever they might talk about. They're forgetting about the other 85%. If you look at Monte Carlo simulations, the biggest risk, or back tests, the biggest risk is you dying with too much money. So let's say you retired in 2010, and I said 2010 was one of the first years people started chirping off about how this doesn't work anymore, and you would have been withdrawing inflation adjusted 4%, and your portfolio today would, despite those withdrawals, be worth significantly more than when you first retired. Now, at this point, you can reassess it and go, okay, wait a second. What percentage of my actual portfolio am I scheduled to withdraw now that my portfolio is way up here? And it might end up being a really low percentage if you're sticking to that systematic plan. It might end up being only 2 or 2.5% of your portfolio, at which point, give yourself a raise, take money out of your portfolio. So the idea here is to use some common sense, use it as a rule of thumb, and be flexible, because we need to be flexible in life.
Yeah, thank you. I love that, because it's, a lot of people think that they need to live even more frugally in retirement. That isn't necessarily always the case. As you mentioned, the past 14 years have been amazing with the market. So, when you adjust it and you assess it at that point in time, as you very well mentioned, it's very likely that, it's not actually 4%, maybe it's 3%, maybe it's even less. So readjust that at all times. So, I mean, Andrew, you've spoken to a lot of retirees, I'm sure, in especially when writing your books, and in terms of circumstances. How do most retirees feel about the 4% rule when they actually implement it? Are there any misconceptions or common concerns that you've heard from people?
I think it's much the same as it is when people first start investing. They ask many of the same questions, like, what if the markets drop? And I think having a broad sense of knowledge with respect to this, and having a degree of flexibility, and that flexibility meaning that it can actually help you on an emotional level, actually that's key. And so that's the thing I try to talk to people about, and not to necessarily look for reasons why it's not going to work. And a lot of people will do that all the time. Like when they're thinking about adding money to the markets, they will find something online. Somebody says, markets are going to crash. This isn't going to work anymore. And they hang on to that. Retirees do exactly the same thing. And so again, what really makes sense is close your eyes, close your ears, stick to a sustainable withdrawal plan, be flexible with it. If the market takes a really, really big drop, well, maybe the next year you don't quite take out as much. And if that, again, ends up creating a higher level of emotional equanimity with you, that's the key.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Andrew. So, we've talked about the strategies that can, ultimately, hopefully achieve that early stage retirement, financial independence, whatever you want to call it. But we want to just, I guess, talk a little bit more about destinations and potential places that you can retire and what makes them great places. So we're exploring the International Living's Global Retirement Index, and this is a very valuable resource for identifying the best places to retire around the world. So, every year this company, or I believe it's a magazine, they rank countries, and the index evaluates various countries that are based on a lot of key factors that are important for retirees. The first one is housing. So it addresses the availability, affordability, and quality of housing. Obviously, this makes a big difference in your retirement budget. Next is visas and tax benefits, which are crucial to determine how easy it is to obtain residency and if there are any tax advantages or obligations you might face as an expat over there. Third thing is costs of living. So this factor really helps you understand, how far your retirement savings are going to stretch in different countries. got an affinity rating, and this is an interesting one because it's a little bit more difficult to measure. I believe that International Living, they actually look back at previous responses and surveys when they look at an affinity rating, and it really just measures how welcoming a country can be to expats, and including language barriers and ease of integration, and these sorts of things. Development and governance, this evaluates the infrastructure, the political stability of a country, and really ensures that retirees have access to reliable services as well as living in a safe environment. Climate, I don't need to say much about climate. Andrew and I are both British Columbians and know that living over half the year in rain can be challenging at times. So International Living is obviously factored in weather. And lastly, healthcare, right? It assesses the quality and availability just to make sure that medical services are a top priority for retirees. Now, we don't want to tell you where to retire because each one of you are going to have your own individual circumstances. And we don't want to tell you that, you have to retire for for 365 days of the year in that destination. The whole point about this is being flexible. Now, what we wanted to do is highlight a few countries which span across several continents. I also understand that some people, depending on their passport, may face issues, trying to retire in certain parts of the world. And if this is an issue, you can also explore, things like citizenship by investment plans. But to dive a little bit deeper, we wanted to go into a couple of these destinations, right? So we've got Panama, Thailand, Portugal, South Africa, and India. And actually, quite a few of these destinations are featured in Andrew's book, Millionaire Expat, where he dives a lot deeper into them. So definitely would recommend anyone to read that. Yeah, got the plug.
Third edition. It's third edition. So it's the
So-
last 3 chapters of the third edition. I profiled 10 different countries, interviewed people in those countries, and then went through what I felt really were the important elements of living abroad. And I went into a few other details too, actually, that International Living doesn't get into. International Living is a bit of a cheerleader. That's super entertaining. I really enjoy reading their stuff, but they're major cheerleaders for basically every destination that they promote. So it's always good to sort of keep that in mind.
Perfect. So, I mean, we're gonna get to the Q&A section pretty soon, but we just wanted to, just go a little bit deeper into some of these destinations. Andrew, look, you have spent a lot of time in Panama, so I'd love to, to kind of pass it over to you to talk a little bit about your experience there, in terms of an ideal place for retirement.
Yeah, it's something that, so my wife and I have actually been residents of Panama since 2021. But when I say residents, here's the cool thing about the flexibility of Panama. Essentially, it's like tax residency. We've spent 4 months there this year. So we're often there from, say, January to the end of April. And for us, the weather is perfect. Because depending on what you like, you can end up having it here. So if you love really hot weather, which year round I don't, but if you do, you could be down in some of the beach areas. We're up in the mountains. And so we're in a place called Boquete. And Boquete is at the base of Volcan Baru, which is an inactive volcano. What's super cool about Volcan Baru is it's the highest point in Panama when you actually get to the top. And on a clear day, you can see it's the only place on Earth from which you can see the Pacific and the Atlantic from the exact same location. So we actually hiked up it a couple of months ago, and we had one of those clear days, and it was just so surreal, actually. I had my phone to take a video of it, and there's the Caribbean. And I panned across, and there's the Pacific. The temperature in Boquete, where we like to be, is it drops to 17 degrees Celsius in the middle of the night. So I mean, that's as low as it typically gets, down to 17. Highs during the day usually up to about 26. For me, that's a perfect climate. I mean, it's not going to fit everybody, but for me, that's a perfect climate, and it's like that year round. And so when you look at climate where it says here on the screen, tropical with a long rainy season, the rains in the tropics, typically in this case, they're really short-lived during the day. So you might get June, July, August tend to be rainier months in Panama. But what will happen is you'll get rain for an hour and it just dumps down. So it's not like a place like Vancouver Island, where I'm actually from, where you just get this, what I call Vancouver Island drizzle all winter. It just like Vancouver, you just get drizzle for months on end. It's more of like skies open up. Often it's at the same time every day, give or take an hour. Those of you who have lived in the tropics actually will relate to this. Skies open up, it pours for an hour, and then it's clear and sunny, and the roads dry up, and I'm on my bike. It tends to be an easy place to generally gain residency. If you're actually going to be looking at residency in other countries, getting an immigrant residential expert lawyer is a really great idea. And don't go with what's necessarily cheapest. So one place to start is you could find Facebook groups for expats in any of these countries, or retirees in Panama. You can actually find expat groups on Facebook, for example, and you can ask the question, okay, residency lawyer, someone who can guide me through the residency process. I don't want what's cheap, I want what's best. And I'm telling you, this is so important. Go with the best recommendations, not with the cheap ones. You get a lot of people that will move from the States and from Canada and from Europe to a place like Panama because it's cheaper. It costs less money. Many of them are going to use also cheaper services to get their residency. Pelly and I went with a firm called Kramer and Kramer, and they held our hand through every step of the process. Like, physically, we get there, they meet us at this location, they take us to this location at the immigrant office, they stand there with us every step of the way. It was so simple. It's not expensive. I think the entire process for the lawyer was probably, and for the two of us, was probably around $8,000, including everything. And we got our residency a year before other people who'd applied around the same time, who went with, you know, sometimes some less established law firms that claim that they could do it more cheaply. Benefits of living in Panama: you can get two different types of visas. One is a pensionada visa. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you have for example, you can be 45, you can be 55, whatever. You can be 35. To get a pensionada visa, though, you have to prove that you have some kind of passive government or insurance-related income that is about $1,500 a year. I just wrote that down somewhere here. Actually, it's less than that. But it's $1,000 a month. So if you can prove that you have $1,000 a month in guaranteed income, you can qualify for a pensionada visa. When you have that visa, you cannot work in the country, but you can live in the country. And so another popular one is the Friendly Nations visa, which is the one that I have. So I can work in the country, and I can earn my income from outside the country. So for example, when I give financial wellness talks around the world, which I do, Panama does not tax you on money you earn outside of Panama. So if I give a financial wellness talk in Dubai and I get paid for that, Panama does not tax me on that income. So same if you're working online and your source is another country, you're not going to pay Panamanian taxes on that money. So in terms of a tax efficient location, it's fabulous. Perks for people living there, especially, I guess one of the reasons why international living is often rates this country in the top 3 is that for pensioners, they end up getting, for older people, they end up getting really great perks. Like if you are 55 years old as a woman or 60 and above as a man, I don't yet qualify, but you get a whole range of discounts on everything from hotels to restaurant meals to airline flights to prescription medications. So yeah, I have a lot of nice things to say about Panama. Sorry if I talk too much.
No, that's great, Andrew. Thanks a lot for sharing that information. I think for a lot of people, they don't really know the ins and outs of it. So, that's very helpful. So I'm going to talk about one over here. So South Africa. Now, South Africa, it isn't really a place where a lot of people would think to retire. And we're well aware, that, but it's been gaining a lot of popularity amongst UAE expats, and for a couple of different reasons. One of the most appealing aspects is the retirement visa scheme that they have over there. So this scheme, it's accessible for the majority of expats. So it makes, actually achieving or, sort of getting that long-term residency possible. So to qualify for a retirement visa in South Africa, retirees, they need to meet certain financial requirements. So the first thing is an income requirement. So they need to prove that they have a monthly income of at least $2,500 per month, which is from a pension or retirement annuity or other forms of income, such as rental income or dividends. And also, you're actually able to renew the visa. So retirement visa is valid for 4 years, but can be renewed. So that actually provides a little bit, more of a stability when it comes to retirees. Cost of living, it's another huge advantage. So compared to many Western countries, compared to the UAE, cost of living in South Africa is significantly lower. This means your retirement savings obviously can go a lot further, allowing for a much higher quality of life without breaking the bank. I'd say the main one for me for South Africa is quality of life. I was there just last week, and South Africa offers incredible array of natural beauties, outdoor activities. The time I was there, we spent time. It almost felt like a wellness retreat, and it was just a holiday. We were hiking in the mountains, going for runs, mountain biking, playing tennis, golf, kayaking, whatever you can think of. It's there. Amazing weather, stunning beaches, mountains, national parks. So you always feel like almost doing an activity when you're there. So there is, I'd say, something for everyone. And then look, just on a personal note, I've been going to South Africa for 20 years. My parents lived there for 6 months of the year in a community that has a lot of expats. I'd say their experiences have shown that, firsthand that a lot of these communities over there can be very welcoming, very vibrant, and then there is an expat community. Look, of course, we can't ignore that there's concerns about crime and safety, and these issues are definitely real, so they shouldn't be overlooked. But I'd say many expats find that by taking reasonable precautions and sort of locating themselves in regions before, it's all about doing a lot of research, usually will obviously mean a much more enjoyable and sort of successful retirement. So that's South Africa, another key one. Andrew, I'm going to pass it back over to you to talk a little bit about Thailand.
Yeah, it's nice that we can get retirement visas for Thailand. There's no capital gains tax on your portfolio if you choose to move there. So, that's a really nice perk for that country. You have to be typically, though, 50 years old to qualify for their retirement visa. You need a security deposit of 800,000 baht into a Thai account at least 2 months before applying. In case you're curious, that's 22,000 US dollars. So you have to be able to deposit 22 grand. They want to see that you're solvent, right? They want to see that you have enough money. And that's the case for many of these places. They want to see that you've got some kind of income, that you've got some kind of financial assets. You're a perk for their economy. It's one of the reasons why they'll often want to draw you, or that's why they offer digital nomad visas. That's why they'll offer perks and retirement visas. For Thailand, you have to have a monthly income of at least $1,800 a month. And so that includes something like a pension or some kind of cash annuity or some kind of guaranteed income stream. As mentioned, there's no capital gains tax there too, which is lovely if you're actually a resident there. So as you're withdrawing your 4%, that money that you withdraw is your money, every single penny of that. So you're not going to have to pay any taxes on it. Like Panama, Thailand has a wide variety of different places that you could be. You could have small town feel in a place like Pai, which if you like small towns, nice rivers running through it, enough tourism to bring in different types of restaurants. My wife and I spend a lot of time in Thailand, and at risk of talking too much about it, I'll just say that there's a lot of variety. The healthcare tends to be really good on the private level. So if you're willing to spend a little bit of money, and I say it is a little bit of money because it costs a lot less than it does in most other countries, you can get top class medical care in Thailand. The seasons are typically, or the weather is typically hot. So even up in a northern place like Pai or Chiang Mai, which are cooler than places like Phuket and Bangkok, they're still relatively hot. So evenings can be cool, and that's quite nice. So in some of the northern areas, you might want to put on like a long sleeve shirt. You definitely don't need a jacket unless you're Thai. You'll notice, like, what's that guy wearing that parka for? It's like 25 degrees. Well, yeah, for that guy, 25 degrees might be kind of cool. So yeah, definitely in terms of the culture, sorry if this thing is, I'm getting kind of excited, so I'm ended up buffering this and it's making all kinds of noise. They call it the country of smiles, and the Thai people generally tend to be lovely and some of the best lowest cost massages in the world. Actually, I got to stop because I could just keep talking about
I
Thailand.
I've spent a lot of time there myself also. I did a lot of backpacking a while ago, and that was, Thailand was the sort of central place that we would go back to. So go to Laos and then go back to Thailand, go to Vietnam and go back to Thailand. And I agree, it's such an incredible place. So Andrew, thank you for that. I'm gonna go over to India. So, and the reason why I used India as a retirement destination is because this is very relevant because we've got a significant amount of UAE expat clients who have ties to India. I would say it's a huge, sort of, and specifically in the UAE. And one of the primary attractions is the cost of living. It's significantly lower than the majority of countries globally. And this affordability, it actually extends to housing, healthcare, daily expenses. So, you're really able to live a very comfortable lifestyle without depleting retirement savings. Now, I would say with India as a sort of retirement destination, this wasn't, I don't want to highlight it purely for expats, but obviously for, Indians who live in Dubai that are likely going to, repatriate back to India. So, this is not going to be applicable to you, which is a majority of, I'm sure the people on the webinar. But let's say that you're not Indian and that you want to retire there. There are some retirement visa options it's not a specific retirement visa, but there are other visa options. So there's something called an entry X visa, and this is available to foreign nationals of Indian origin, so also to their spouses, their children. So it can be extended in India and also provides basically a long-term residency option for retirees with family ties to India. And then, there's also tourist visa, which is not ideal for permanent residency, but you can stay in India for extended periods using a tourist visa, which can be valid for up to 10 years with stays of 180 days at a time. So, for some people who want to live maybe there for a few months of the year. But then also what's interesting is foreigners who are aged 60 and above can actually apply for a long-term visa. And that allows them to stay in India for up to 5 years without the need for this sort of frequent renewal. So very ideal if you're in that later stage of retirement. Healthcare, big one, very attractive feature. There's a lot of private healthcare hospitals with very affordable services and very high level of quality. Also, a lot of retirees take advantage of wellness treatments that are widely available there. And I would also say, look, in terms of, climate, very, very diverse. It's a humongous country. So a lot of retirees go to places like Goa. Specifically, it's a coastal state and there's a lot of community, a lot of social life. But I would say one thing that's really important that's been a huge improvement recently is development and governance in India. There's been a lot of improvements in that regard, especially in urban areas. So, more modern infrastructure, better transportation, communication facilities. So it makes it a lot more convenient as well as enjoyable for retirees. So the last one that I wanted to, or Andrew, I'm going to get you to highlight is Portugal. And this is one that comes up all the time. A lot of expats, dream of that retirement in Portugal. A lot of people hear about Portugal. So love for you to shine a bit more light on this one.
Yeah, Portugal's always been quite popular, and the government, it's probably about almost 20 years ago, they introduced, I believe that's when they introduced the D7 visa, which drew a lot of people to Portugal for just its nice temperate climate. It's not crazy hot. It can be pretty hot down in the Algarve in the summer, which is the southern section, but you've got some of the most beautiful beaches in the world there. You get these nice breezes that come through too that make it quite tolerable. So it's been a really popular place because it's been typically one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest place to retire in Western Europe. And things have changed a little bit with respect to that because, oh, you're on the South Africa screen there. Things have changed a little bit because with the golden visa and the popularity of the D7 visa, it's actually bumped up the price of a lot of things. And so historically, Portugal was always cheaper than Spain up until the last few years. It's been a fair bit of a reversal there with respect to most of the cities where Portugal is becoming more expensive. And in part, I think it was just the accessibility of the golden visa. So the golden visa allowed you to just come in and when I explain it to you, you'd be like, what? Is that good? The golden visa would be such that, you'd buy a property in Portugal and you could qualify for the golden visa if it was above a certain threshold. And each country in Europe, many of the countries in Europe have their golden visa options. And to get in, the real estate price that you had to pay was lower than it was in, I think, pretty much all of the other European countries that offered the golden visa. And you didn't actually have to be a tax resident. So you could go there, get a gold, buy a property, establish residency, or not so much residency, but non-tax residency through, let's say, a golden visa. If you stayed for 183 days, you would become a tax resident of Portugal. But if you chose to stay just for 7 days a year, you could still maintain your residency there, but not be liable to pay any Portuguese taxes on your income. So it allows people, or allowed people, just freely also move throughout Europe, throughout the Schengen region. So within the Schengen region of Europe, you have generally you can only stay 90 days within a 183-day period. So if you're a traveler, you're a digital nomad, you might find that you've bumped into this problem before where you've overstayed your residency. To actually gain residency, some people will say, well, if I gain residency there, officially, okay, I can float within and out of the Schengen, or I can float within the Schengen region. I can stay in areas like Portugal and Spain, but I'll have to pay European taxes. With the golden visa, you didn't. And so what that did, though, is it bumped up real estate prices a lot. And so last year they made some changes to the golden visa. And so with that golden visa now, you can still attain it, and you still only have to spend 7 days a year there to maintain that free roaming status within Portugal and the EU. But the requirement is slightly different now. So you have to donate. One thing is you have to donate like 250,000 euros to some kind of developmental project. That's a donation. It's a Portuguese developmental project. Another thing is you can't do it through real estate at all anymore. So you can't do it through purchasing real estate, but you can buy a approved fund. So for example, it would be something like a money market fund, or a mutual fund, or in the UK we know it as a unit trust. I'd be really careful with that. I think it's definitely worth looking into, like, what kind of fund is it? What kind of flexibility do I have with it? Can I pull my money out? Is it contractual, where I have to be in it for a really long period of time, like those products that are so prolifically sold in the UAE, those investment-linked assurance schemes? You don't want any part of that. But it's actually a pretty viable option, as is, of course, still the D7 visa. So the D7 visa, though, is a little bit different, whereby you have to stay at least 183 days a year there to actually maintain that one. And so you become a tax resident of Portugal if you actually have a D7 visa. And you don't actually need that much money to qualify for that D7. So it is about 8,500 US dollars of proved passive income per year. If you have a spouse, add 50% to that. If you have a dependent child, add another 30%. But yeah, Portugal is so popular for so many reasons. The culture, the food, the variety, the weather. It's a fantastic place. It ranks really quite highly on the World Health Organization's list of healthcare treatments and facilities as well. So the program, I think it ranks in the top 12 in the world. I believe it was 12th the last time I checked.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Andrew. So look, we've covered a lot of ground today, and so we'd love to hear from you. So we've got a lot of questions. A lot of people have asked questions about retirement strategies, investment tips. So I'm just going to dive straight into it, Andrew. So got a question over here. So somebody's asking, hi, Andrew, UAE expat here. Is there a difference if I keep 20% of my funds allocated towards bonds in my 80-20 strategy, just sitting in the savings account to earn 5% interest, or should I buy a bond ETF?
Oh, that's a great question, because it comes up so much now with bank accounts and money market accounts starting to pay higher interest rates. And of course, people looking at their bond ETF past performance, like over the past 3 or 5 or 6 years, and saying, wow, especially with the big drop that occurred in 2022, many people are looking at their longer term bond market performance and saying, well, it's been negative. in a lot of cases. So including the interest, the capital appreciation, it's been like negative interest on a lot of global bond market ETFs, depending on when you bought it. However, here's why I wouldn't do that. Interest rates in banks can change at any time. So that 5% guaranteed rate of return, although it might sound really great, it could change next month or next year in a lot of cases. Number two, bond prices are so depressed. They've dropped. So much like the stock market, when the stock market prices dropped considerably, it bodes really well for the future. I'm not talking necessarily about future interest rates. I'm talking about capital appreciation. So bond prices, just like stock prices, they can rebound. They always do rebound. And when those bond prices rebound from the trench that they're currently in, that plus the interest, which is actually higher now because interest rates have risen globally, yields on these bonds tend to be higher because also that's a combination of interest plus with respect to the actual price ratio. The future for that bond ETF's growth is, if you look at the realities of the probabilities are that it will and should over the next several years easily outstrip what you'll probably get in that bank account. So putting that bank money in that bank account might look really tempting, but that bond ETF next year could end up making 10 or 11%, at which point you'll feel kind of silly. And at that point, here's a weird thing. When do you think everybody pulls their money out of their savings accounts and puts it back into that bond ETF? Yeah, after the fact, after it's done well. It's one reason why we don't look at past performance to try and figure out what we're going to do in the future. We don't look at what we think is current performance before determining what we're going to do right now.
Great, Andrew, thank you for that. So Alexander is asking a question regarding inflation adjusted 4% annual withdrawal. What inflation rate should I use for adjusting if I retire, for example, in Thailand, but my portfolio currency is in US dollars?
Yeah, such a great question. So I'll give you an example of that. A little bit trickier, but actually quite amusing in one respect, because let's say, let's take an example of Argentina. So let's say you retired 5 years ago in Argentina, and inflation in Argentina has been like crazy, as we know. So it's just absolutely soared. And so somebody might think, well, okay, we're retired in Argentina. I've got to withdraw an inflation adjusted 4% from my investment portfolio. So say I'm withdrawing $40,000 in year one, and let's say inflation was 100%. Wow, so do I have to withdraw $80,000 in year two? No, it doesn't actually work like that, because what ends up happening is a country's inflation rate is determined in its own actual currency. So if you were sitting with $100 in Argentina before the currency crashed, that $100 in terms of its buying power, inflation could have risen 50% in the local currency. But in terms of your buying power of that $100 would not have dropped as a result of that, because the prices of all those entities would have gone up in Argentinian currency. So now you have a globally diversified portfolio, so you're not hinged to a specific currency. So what you could do is you could say you're living in Thailand. You could look at what was inflation in Thailand, and then look at something like, how did the Thai baht move relative to a basket of global currencies during that time, and just make a slight adjustment there. So if the Thai baht had dropped considerably, then the money that you have is actually worth significantly more. So your adjustment for inflation might actually not even be an increase at all. You might be able to just live on the exact same amount. So you have to combine those other factors.
Thanks, Andrew. So over here, we've got a question, and this is actually a good question because somebody's asking about, what about Gulf countries as places for retirement? So I'm happy to answer this. And it's interesting. I think I can't, I guess, answer for all of the Gulf countries, but I can answer in regards to the UAE. So in the UAE, historically, the UAE has been a place where people go to work there as an expatriate. You retire, and the likelihood is that you go back to your home country, or you find a new retirement destination. Now, more recently, and I believe that this has been in the last sort of 5 years or so, there have been more long-term solutions to live in the UAE. For example, there are golden visa options. So, if you, for example, earn a certain amount of money with your current job, you're able to get a 10-year visa. Or if you have a property value of 2 million dirhams that's unmortgaged, you'd be able to qualify for the same golden visa. There's also a green visa, which my understanding is that it's for a 5-year period. And there's also retirement visas now. So similar to the golden visa, you can qualify through different investment schemes. I believe that it's an investment fund onshore, and then also the property route as well. Usually a 2 million dirham property that's unmortgaged. So in the UAE, there actually are options. I think what a lot of people face issues with in the UAE is more cost of living. But look, if you are able to, get one of these visas and you can control those, other factors, then definitely at least the option is available to you at this point in time. Okay, so Andrew, Katya has asked a question. Good one too. So you mentioned not to put all of your eggs in one basket and gave the example of the Japanese stock market and how the US stock market wasn't profitable for 2 decades. How can we diversify our portfolios to add more global stocks and bonds to manage risk? And what advice do you have for stock picking or bond picking?
The advice that I have for stock picking is not to do it, as tempting as that might be. So don't pick individual stocks, but build an investment portfolio. If you're doing it on your own, build a diversified portfolio of ETFs. And when we say that, we want to ensure that we do it with the least number of funds possible. And so diversification, that might sound like it flies in the face of diversification, but it doesn't. So let's say you take a global stock market ETF. So Vanguard's All World ETF, trading under the ticker symbol VWRA. That one entity, that one ETF, has the entire world's markets within it. You have fewer moving parts when you have the lowest number of funds. Like back in the day, you used to have to buy, like, if you wanted global diversification, you'd have to buy an emerging market fund, a developed international fund, a US fund. So you'd be ending up with a much more complicated portfolio. But behaviorally, investors do so much better. So in the real world trenches of actual real world investor results over time, the lower number of funds that you can have with a diversified portfolio, the better. Which is why in Millionaire Expat, I gave some examples of all-in-one funds as well. So an all-in-one fund would have a global stock and a global bond allocation within it, and you're just buying one ETF for the rest of your life. And that makes things really simple when you're withdrawing money as a retiree too, because you're withdrawing money from just one ETF. So it keeps things really simple. It's less likely for you to get in your own way. It's less likely for you to start to speculate. Likewise, I know, Akshay, on the financial services end, you could speak to that, where you'll have a firm, say, like Sarwa, that can actually manage, diversify the portfolio for you, which has the same kind of behavioral element. Akshay, you might want to talk about that.
Yeah, of course. And Katya, the way what Andrew's referring to is, it's for some people you just might find it very difficult to, manage your own investment portfolio when it comes to having the time, the knowledge, the inclination. So, for example, at Sarwa, we offer something called Sarwa Invest, and that is a managed advisory solution. So we take care of the portfolio construction, the dividend reinvesting, the investment rebalancing, and all of the investments are, in the portfolios are globally diversified portfolios of ETFs, right? So covering all the major asset classes, geography, sectors, so the US stock market, foreign developed markets, the emerging markets. So, and I think the key part about that is the rebalancing, where, I think everyone thinks that they can rebalance, but what ends up happening is some assets are obviously going to be performing better than the others. And you say, hey, maybe I should wait a bit longer. Maybe I should, should I rebalance right now? Oh, no, I'll wait for a bit. And then you end up, that's almost like a version of sort of market timing, right? So this kind of takes the fuss and the emotion out of it. So just automated. You put money into an account, it gets automatically invested. So, that's a really easy way to sort of achieve that global diversification, whilst also having a steady hand where you're not really getting too involved. So thank you, everyone, for all the questions. We've got quite a few more over here. I'm also mindful of time. So answer a few more. But then obviously anyone that we can't get to will also, try to answer those offline. So I've got a question over here. Is investing in the US stock market, for example, the S&P 500, sufficient? Or should I be looking at global diversification? I think we've covered that, just now. It's really important to make sure that you get exposure, to a variety of different asset classes, different geographies, and specifically different geographies, because there's going to be periods in time, right? We talked about it, the forgotten decade, the year 2000 to 2011, when the US stock market stayed pretty much stagnant. So you want to make sure that you've got other asset classes, other markets in your portfolio that are performing well at different times. Just makes that whole investment journey a lot more stable and a lot more secure. So Andrew, we've got a couple of questions here, and two that have mentioned the term de-dollarization, and both from European investors. So considering de-dollarization, should a European still invest in a bond ETF that includes dollars, or rather a Euro ETF?
Keep it global. So again, this is all about diversification and establishing that global bond index and the actual price of that ETF. So its listed price, whether it's listed in USD, whether it's listed in euros, whether it's listed in pounds, is totally irrelevant. If it's a global bond market index, if we're indeed talking about bonds, you've invested in every single currency. It's just priced in a specific currency. So for example, some of them are priced in pounds. Some of them are priced in US dollars. But the movement of the US dollar and the movement of the pound are totally irrelevant. Like you might say, okay, well, I've just looked at the past results over the last 5 years, and this one in USD has done better or worse than the same one that's priced in pounds. Totally irrelevant. If you were to convert them right now into the same currency, so if you owned one of these things 5 years ago, you converted them into the exact same currency, any currency you want, the returns on that would have been identical. So it's really important not to think about currency movements at all. Keep it globally diversified, and the price that the ETF is listed in is totally irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. Or the currency it's listed in, totally irrelevant.
Perfect. So Omar is asking a question. So for people near to retirement like me, and with the current situation of an all-time high level of the market, what is the percentage in cash that's good to have to take advantage of any market drops? And how do I know if it's the time to enter?
Generally, Omar, I wouldn't so much think too much about a cash buffer. I wouldn't think at all about market levels or all-time highs. And I think largely because markets are mostly at all-time highs. So I wrote an article recently. I've been investing for the past 35 years. And I think during 23 or 24 of those years, the markets hit all-time highs. I mean, so all-time highs are they're just normal. And trying to keep a certain amount of money in cash as a result of us believing possibly that the markets are going to crash is not entirely necessary. So again, this is where we really need to try to remove our emotions. If you're choosing to withdraw, let's say you've got a $1 million portfolio and you're retired this year and you're going to withdraw 4% of that, and you withdraw $40,000. That's your cash. That's your money. That's your money for the year. Now, some people might choose to break that up quarterly, and for sure they could do that, but they have to be disciplined about it. And as Akshay mentioned before, not get into speculating, not get into, oh, this is the right time to pull out a little bit of money. That's why financial management of our money, it's incredibly simple. The process is so simple. But for the average Homo sapien, it's so darn hard because of our human emotions.
Perfect, Andrew. Thank you for that. So you know what? I realize that we're 20 past 7 at the moment. So maybe we can answer a couple more questions if that's okay with you. So I'm happy to answer this one. So we got a question. What type of assets do I need to invest in to execute the 4% rule? Having a global or US equity fund, what type of bond funds, in which location should be, and the more specifics of that. So we talked about this a bit more, right? So in order to really execute the 4% rule, when they did the studies, when this has been back tested, it's not based on individual stocks. It's not based on, a real estate property. It's based on a globally diversified portfolio. So when we talk about a globally diversified portfolio, usually we're talking about, obviously the globe, but specifically emerging markets, foreign developed markets, and the US stock market. So these are the components, but it's also factoring in global government as well as corporate bonds. So the studies are done on that. So I would recommend, obviously using that globally diversified portfolio. A lot of people go for the 60-40 portfolio, but make sure that the asset allocation is in line with your goals and your time horizon. If you are very close to retirement, that asset allocation may need to shift. If you are, 20 years old and you've got 40 years ahead of you for retirement, you might be able to, take a little bit more risk. There's also a huge emotional and behavioral side of that. So we talked about it before. You think that you might be able to take a lot of risk. Temper those expectations. Maybe dial it back a little bit. See how it goes. See how you react when the markets actually take a dive. Because if you're 20, if you're 30, you're gonna go through moments of time when the markets are down. If the markets were only going up, we would all be multi-millionaires. So it's all about having that steady hand and making sure that you stick with your investment plan, over that journey. So quick one over here, Andrew. Somebody's asked about the immigration firm that you used.
Oh, for Panama?
Yeah.
It was a firm called Kramer and Kramer, Kraemer. Kramer and Kramer. They're outstanding. There was one other thing I didn't mention too about Panama, is that to maintain residency, you only have to be there 2 days every 2 years.
Oh wow, that's great, because usually in places it's either 3 months or six, half of the year, something like that. So that's very, very good for people who want to be on the move.
Yeah.
Okay, so Andrew, I'm going to give you one last question. So let me have a look, because there are quite a few left. Okay, so Diogo's asked a question. Does it make sense to buy property in one of those retirement destinations, especially if I'm certain of living there, to save in housing in the future? So buying today versus buying later, or renting later at a higher price?
Yeah, it can certainly make sense. I mean, and that's up to you too, in terms of the stability that it offers you. And it's largely psychological and individual. So for my wife and I, we have not purchased property in Panama, but many of our friends have. And for us, one of the reasons is that we just love the flexibility of being able to come and go. We don't have to be there every year. So we don't have to worry about, when we leave the property, anything happening to the property. We don't have to worry about renters, but renters can also give you income. So it's so dependent on who you are. Some people feel much more comfortable and stable, especially if they're staying in a country, knowing that they have their own place. So they're renting from some people. Let's say those people could decide to sell the property. You might have been there for several years, and now you have to just up and shift. So I've seen that too. And a lot of people are, it can be very disruptive. So it really does come down to the individual with respect to that question.
Great, Andrew. I said that was going to be the last one, but Chris has asked a really good question, and I think it's important to touch upon it because we didn't actually cover it in the presentation. So Chris has asked, "Hi, Andrew. I used to live in the UAE and have now moved to Germany. My portfolio is in US dollars. Should I continue to invest in US dollars, or should I start investing in euros?"
Well, the portfolio isn't actually an investment in US dollars. So that's a really important component to remember. The second part is that if you actually have just moved to Germany from the UAE, and I don't know how long you've actually lived there, but if you've just moved there, making the switch won't give you a really big capital gain tax hit, because you're only charged capital gains taxes on profits earned, realized profits. So when you actually sold, profits earned after the date of, say, its repatriation to Germany. So if you've only been there for a short period of time, you can easily switch, but do remember that your money's probably in a taxable account. So if you've been in Germany now for 10 years, and you have this globally diversified portfolio of ETFs, and you decide, it's priced in USD, it's more convenient for it to be priced in euros. So I'm gonna actually sell the USD ETFs and purchase the ones in euros. You're going to pay, especially if you've been there for a while, you might have to pay, you will have to pay, a relatively hefty capital gain tax on that growth, just for that convenience of shifting that money. So that's something to consider.
Great. And then, just to, this isn't a question from Chris, but, let's say if you are an expat, living here in the UAE, and your plan is, let's give 3 examples. We've got a Canadian, we've got somebody from the US, and we've got somebody from the UK. Is it advisable for the Canadian to invest in a globally diversified portfolio in Canadian dollars, the US person to invest in US dollars, and the British person to invest in British pounds? Is that what you would advise?
It keeps things really quite simple. So I'll give you an example. So I'm Canadian. So my ETFs are, they're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange and they're priced in Canadian dollars. Remember, that's not an investment in Canadian dollars. It's investment in every currency. It's a globally diversified portfolio. But when I move, if I choose to move back to Canada, I can transfer my ETFs from my brokerage straight to a brokerage in Canada, and it will be a direct transfer. So I don't actually have to sell anything. So it becomes quite simple in that respect. If my portfolio were priced in pounds, I wouldn't actually, or listed in pounds, I wouldn't actually be able to easily do that. So I would have to sell it, put the money into Canadian dollars or US dollars, then transfer the money. In Canada, I could transfer to my ETFs. If they were listed in US dollars trading on the New York Stock Exchange, I could cross them over. But then I don't recommend anyone investing off the New York Stock Exchange because of the US withholding tax that you could end up paying if you die, or your heirs could end up paying. So in most cases, people in the UAE, when they're choosing to invest in a US dollar listed global ETF like VWRA, if you are actually Canadian and you're trying to transfer that across to a Canadian brokerage, you're going to be out of luck. So you're not actually going to be able to do that. So yeah, it's one of the reasons why I like to keep things really, really simple. If you're from Europe, I recommend an all-in-one portfolio ETF priced in euros. If you're from Europe, for the same reason I just talked about. If you're Canadian, an all-in-one portfolio ETF, you could live in the UAE, but own an all-in-one portfolio ETF priced in Canadian dollars. You can transfer it across. Likewise, if you're Australian, an all-in-one portfolio ETF listed in Australian dollars. When you repatriate back to Australia, transfer it across. So it's one of the things I talked about in the 3rd edition of Millionaire Expat, and then provided some examples of that and some model portfolios with those ETFs.
Amazing. And with that, thank you all very much for your time today. We really appreciate all of the great questions. I know there's quite a few that we didn't get to, so we're going to try our best to answer them directly by email, or just feel free to reach out to us directly to have a chat. Andrew, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for your insights, the stories, the exampple. I know that the audience has definitely found this to be very valuable. So really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Actually, thank you so much. One other thing I just want to mention is if you're British, the rules are a little bit different. Transferring the money across directly from, say, being in the UAE to the UK, you could end up paying a big tax bill. So you have to sell before the tax year. If you're from the UK, you have to actually sell. So you're not going to make a transfer. You're going to sell and then transfer the cash to the UK. Just wanted to add that in case somebody got the wrong idea on that one.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Akshay.
Okay.